Hi, everybody. Dr. Friedman here. It's week 3 out of 15 in the TTRPG Actual Play Research Seminar, and we have finally escaped the clutches of the dragon, at least for a little while. Today is going to be another short video because we have a class visitor, and I've talked already a little bit about how class visitors worked in my previous video. We had Jeff Strummer of Party of One podcast, who is a full-time professional podcaster balancing the kind of creative work in the TTRPG space with more client-focused podcasting as the day job. I really love Party of One podcast as a teaching tool, and I recommend it highly because it allows for students to go off and explore systems that you or I might not yet be familiar with. The lovely thing about Party of One's website is that it actually sorts the episodes according to genre, as well as things like system. They're all duet games played with just 2 players, hence the name. Which means, as Jeff explained to my students, that not every game can be covered by Party of One, but quite a few can. In the wonderful questions that ensued in our discussion, we talked about everything from what the editing workflow and the weekly workflow of putting on a podcast is like, incredibly useful since students are thinking about doing that as part of their unessay project work, as well as what goes into the selection of both games to play and guests to bring on. And thinking a little bit about the economics. One of the interesting things to me about Party of One is that it is not directly monetized in terms of a pay for play. You can't get your game onto the show by sponsoring it, nor do guests pay to be on it. They are often, featuring something or getting excited for something or getting ready for a crowdfunding campaign, but that's separate. Jeff has done a series that I really liked for the Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast Kickstarter, but as Jeff noted, it was very separate from the kind of main Party of One stream. For one thing, there was more than one player in those games. But it was a really useful snapshot into the independent world, both of games and of actual play, as compared to, Kate's perspective as being officially more part of the big dragon, but also the kind of entire cottage industry that's built around it in terms of convention play, one-shots that are very geared towards a particular new book that's coming out, all of those sorts of things. So we got a little bit of a peek into the larger TTRPG community and the alternate values, which is amazing because, of course, Jeff's main job is kind of as a marketing professional and had really smart things to say about the work of marketing. And yet, this podcast exists primarily outside of those kinds of capitalist logics, as most of the TTRPG community has a similarly sort of complex and dynamic and not clear-cut relationship to capital. It's one of the things I find really fascinating about thinking about how art is made and the people-centered nature of it. It was a great conversation. And one of the interesting things was, God, he was a trooper. At one point so what I do while we're having these kinds of conversations is I almost operate like a pop-up video. Sometimes I've got some questions and I start off with questions, but really I want the students to take agency in where we go with the conversation. And so on our central screen, we've got the Zoom window with our guest, and then I keep a browser open where I'm pulling up things as the speaker is mentioning them. So we talked about the For the Queen SRD, which was really exciting because the students were like, we know that. And other games, we went to the For the Queen website, and that's where we kind of blew up a little bit. Turns out we have the university's kind of filters are a complex beast on the best of days. So, for example, I can never pull up Story Brewer's website on any computer on the Auburn network. I don't know why. It just won't let me. There's some sort of glitch in the system. This time, whatever I pulled up from Party of One, and literally it was just an episode page from the My Little Pony game found in the attic episode. Nothing was automatically playing. There was no video. There was nothing. But the whole room's system shut down, and we had to quickly flip from the desktop computer that controls everything in the room to my laptop. Luckily, because we had both of those going, I had my personal Zoom account logged in to be a face. In addition to the room that we were using for recording and audio, we were able to have a seamless recording experience, but we did lose kind of audio for a second because I keep my laptop muted so that we don't have a kind of feedback loop nonsense. So very exciting. And this is just the nature of virtual visits. Sometimes things go kind of squiggy and you roll with it. And luckily Jeff was a champ and we were able to hot swap really quickly. And we lost no information from when he was spieling and didn't know we couldn't hear us. We can go back to the tape, so to speak. But yeah, no, Jeff was amazing. And what I took away from it was interesting. At the end, I said to Jeff, it's so amazing to me that your ethos for who you want to play with is much the same ethos as who I want to bring into my classroom, which is to say, you know, it's not a way of winning, it's a way of making friends, and finding interesting people who you think will be excited to talk to students, as well as people who you know and have vetted just a little bit to know kind of their deal as far as anybody can know any of these kinds of things. That's particularly important, as Jeff noted, in the TTRPG space, where these personal connections can lead to potential, abuses of trust when you don't do that due diligence. But it really can be this kind of way of, getting to know someone either through playing a game or having them, talk about themselves and talk about how they got to where they are. When all else fails, talking about origins is amazing. And super bonus points to the student who always does a deep dive, looking into the full bio of our guests so they could ask these kinds of amazing salient questions that I'm like, wait, what? How did you know that? I didn't tell you that. So today it was talking about what does it mean to have a degree in comic books, and what was it like to be at Ohio State, which has this amazing comic book collection, scholarly collection, and what does it mean to think like, a four-color panel sort of brain as opposed to just, text on page sort of brain, and how both of those are English majors, but they kind of turn into different sorts of things. We could have gone on for so much longer, which is always the sign that a meeting has gone really well. For the rest of the week, we are doing more intensive skill work. On Thursday, we are doing an in-class exercise on how to read a scholarly article using the two McFarland books that are essay collections on actual play and tabletop role-playing now. They obviously won't be analyzing my piece that they've already read, but there's a lot of other good stuff in both books, and so they'll pick one and kind of, reverse engineer it in class on Thursday and then a little bit over the weekend. We are still collecting, more shows to make a master list. Basically, I need to start doing the math by looking at their course contracts to figure out how many actual plays we are going to be able to cover in the time allotted. If every student in their course contract does the A-level work and devotes it exclusively to filing reports on actual play, all of which seems highly likely, each student in the class, and there are 13 students in the class, will watch 32 actual plays the first 20 minutes and get some data out of that. That's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, because there are thousands of actual plays, but that covers a lot of the big names. So my job very quickly is going to be making sure that that list is robust and that that list is in priority order, um, you know, and also making some decisions about whether individual seasons of some of the bigger names, like, is Dimension 21 one entry, or is it over a dozen because we're going to look at the first 20 minutes of every single, campaign? And I'm inclined to do the latter so that we can get a little bit more information, because that'll also show us some Dimension 20 change over time. Maybe get some data about, set dressing, that sort of thing. Ditto with Critical Role, which of course has transformed drastically in some respects over its campaigns. So this is something that I'm thinking about in the terms of the back end construction at this moment in the course, because very soon students are going to be starting to, sign up for shows that they're going to be responsible for and submitting these kinds of forms. But that's, that's later this week for my planning. Other thing that is on the horizon is I am looking over course contracts with an eye to supporting folks who already have a clear sense of what their unessays are going to be. Unessays are 1 to 2 projects. I take the term from my friend and colleague, Dr. Ryan Cordell, as a way of talking about something that requires intensive thought and research and creative making, but that doesn't follow the structures of a, traditional essay. And it's important to me in this class, where it's an honors research seminar, the students are, half their labor is explicitly basically being my research assistants in a very focused, very specific, not especially flexible sort of way, that the unessays be the place where they can kind of go, run amok. And for some of them, that's going to be drawing in their, their home field of study and, figuring out a way to synthesize for whatever reason. And for some of them, it's going to be a moment to cut loose, to not have to be bound by their, home ways of practice. Not everything has to be accountancy or media studies or what have you. So I want to give, in this space in particular, they're learning, they're going to learn what they're going to learn in terms of the skills and the methods. And they're going to produce what they're going to produce in terms of the labor. I want to give them something that they can take ownership of. So some of them are really clear already about what they want to be doing. And some people we're going to be a few more weeks down the road of reading and listening and talking and playing before we get to this is what I think I want to do. And so those conversations are starting to happen in, different kinds of spaces of office hours and things like that, which is really lovely. This is the first semester where, for the majority of students in the room, I don't have to sell them on anything about this. This is something that they have, many of them have deep experience in, and some of them, and many more have some experience in. And they're able to be the critical mass that brings along the newbies without me having to feel like I'm trying to make, fetch happen. God, I'm not cool. I'm not even like retro cool at this point, folks. But I do have apparently contact and brushes with things that my students think are cool, which is really, really neat. It's nice when we get to geek out together. And this was one of those days, and there'll be more of those days to come. As I've mentioned with class visits, I schedule the first couple of weeks, the rhythm of that, a few visits, and then we do other stuff, and then we might have some more visits. And then the middle of the semester, just to reiterate, is unscheduled precisely because a lot of the people that I think the students might want to talk to really only know their availability a few days ahead of time. So, we build in a lot more flexibility at that point, so that, if I need to go make asks of people who are, um, you know, not 100% in charge of their own time, all the time, then we have the ability for them to kind of choose a couple of different options. What's nice for being in the central time zone, as we are, and teaching at 11 a.m., means that Pacific time, where most of the people that we would talk to, because they're in Seattle or Los Angeles, um, that's 9 a.m., just about the start of the day, but not kind of when everything's super hopping as a general rule. So that also helps a great deal, and is one of the things that I try to be pretty insistent on when I have the ability to ask for when is this class scheduled. Later in the day, in theory, would be um, better, but I actually don't think it would be. I think this is the sweet spot of people haven't really gotten going with their day, but it's also not, the butt crack of dawn. So, anywho, that's so it's a good start to week 3. I am both energized and exhausted. So I am going to finish the recording for now and see you all soon.